This is Daryl with Farfromstock, sitting on a first gen frame. It's first gen Friday. We like to do first gen Friday and Farfromstock Friday type stuff. It is not too fancy of a frame. This is our customer Vinny. Got a very cool truck he's getting built, and he's going to do the motor and transmission build himself and finish the body. We're just doing the chassis. This is a first gen 93 and prior extended cab long bed frame, and not too special of a frame, just a good clean frame. But then you can see here I've got linkage suspension front and rear. This is the beginnings of our kit that we're going to be able to have for sale. Vinny's getting a one-off version, but we're going to sell a kit that does this linkage and airbag long travel soft ride electronically managed system front and rear as a bolt-on kit. You're going to have to drill quite a few holes, but it does use some factory holes to set you up, and it's going to be a bolt-on setup. It will be, for Vinny, over a foot of travel front and rear. We all know that a first gen Dana 60 is an awesome axle, and it is, but it's not awesome at the same time. They're the narrowest axles that ever came underneath a full-size truck practically ever, and kingpins aren't the best on the street, even though they can be made very good. The right side drive that Dodge used for a drive shaft for many years was certainly not ideal over there with the exhaust and everything else. So the width is important. The left side pinion to me is a great advantage, and the weak points, of course, of a third gen axle would be ball joints, wheel bearings, and tie rod ends. But we built all our own steering, so the tie rod ends are gone. And with a high performance aftermarket ball joint kit and a spin free hub kit, they become bomb proof and I would say stronger than the old Dana 60, especially for just handling horsepower. So these are a good axle set. There's a ton of them available. They're cheap, and a rock crawler would love to buy your Dana 60 out the front. This is definitely a very involved build, but we're trying to make it to where it's bolt on and without a lot of difficulty. If you're ready to do a drivetrain conversion with left-hand side transfer case, hopefully you're upgrading your transmission, because there was no first gen transmission. It was great, certainly not an automatic. And with those batch of drivetrain mods, this is a next level modern driving comfortable vehicle, unlike anything these trucks ever were. So it's a constant question, how much is air suspension? And the answer is it's expensive. We can give a ballpark price, and the recipe from truck to truck is super similar. If we're going super fancy, it costs more. If we're going bare bones, it costs less, but it's never cheap. And the question gets asked, why is air suspension so expensive? Well, it's simple, because you aren't putting a lift kit on that modified your original suspension, and you aren't lowering a vehicle or anything like that. You're completely adding a fully re-engineered system. Now, it's true, some vehicles are coil spring stock, and you can modify that with air suspension. But there's no such thing as a stock coil spring vehicle that has long travel coil springs. So if you convert it to air, you run into compromises right away that you would never see in a stock vehicle. So to do a long travel system, which if you don't, you're kind of just being lazy on the project because you're buying all the parts anyways, electronically managed so that it has a level of daily driver feature that just doesn't become a nuisance or annoying, and soft riding, meaning the proper sized bag. Oftentimes people use a bag that they think is big enough or the right size, and it affects ride quality for the negative. Of course, comes out in the subject of travel. You can see that with proper management and proper travel, proper geometry and design, you're just building something from scratch that's all-inclusive, and it's expensive. Air systems on cars, there's nothing new. People have been putting awesome air suspension on cars for decades. Air management is based around that car world. Air management for a car won't make this work in a satisfactory level through one cycle. Volume isn't required, and recovery time is important for it, again, to not be annoying or plain old disappointment. So management isn't just management, it's truck management for large diameter, large volume bags, And that's some of why air suspension is expensive. Fully engineered suspension front to rear, the steering has to go with the suspension or it's just not going to work out. Stock stuff was never meant to travel very far, so you've got to modify all that. So with the main three components of air suspension, management, linkage, bags and shocks, you've got a pretty good pile of money. It's really impossible to build a good, long travel, electronically managed, soft riding air suspension for less than $7,500 in parts. You might be able to cobble some stuff together and you might make it work, but as far as buying parts and having a good system, that's really the bottom dollar. Of course, if you want overlays and fancy powders and maybe you want 14 or 16 inches of travel instead of the foot that we like to engineer into things, again, that's a reason to step up above a regular price. But air suspension is expensive because it's a complete new product that was never intended for your vehicle and uses high-end components. And if you try to use low-end components, you're going to see a performance suffering. You've seen air suspension videos of vehicles going up and down. You got to watch them over again to see if the thing even really moved. That's a sad version of an air suspension on a big truck that went from kind of high to a little higher. And if you're going to spend all the money on all the parts that go into an air suspension, why not have it go real high and drop real low so you have a truck that does everything? By the way, it's going to tow great. So why wouldn't you have that feature where you can tow at any height you want, drop it to hook up trailers and unhook trailers, that kind of things. It is expensive, many components involved, and we like to build it, and we like to build it so it works really well.